You're listening to Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library Podcast. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Overdoing It, where our team of library workers dish about their latest reads, views, and passions, alongside fascinating conversations with local luminaries. I'm your host, Lauren Walker, Director of the Coventry Public Library, and my pronouns are she, her. This episode continues our series, If These Walls Could Talk, where we learn about the historic house museums of Rhode Island. Rhode Island was founded in 1636, and its long history has been well preserved. House museums are a great way to learn about what everyday life was like at different times in history. And with over 30 different historic house museums throughout the state, there's a lot to learn about how Rhode Islanders used to live and also how architecture and interior design have changed over the years. I'm excited to tour Rhode Island's many historic homes, talk with the people who take care of them, and share all of this great local history with our listeners. Today, I'm at the headquarters of the Preservation Society of Newport County, also known as the Newport Mansions, to talk about the mansion called the Elms with Chief Curator Leslie B. Jones. This is an exciting episode for me because I used to work at the Newport Mansions, and I can't wait to talk about the Elms, which is one of my favorites, and has become a little more famous lately as it's featured prominently in the HBO series The Gilded Age. So I'm excited to chat about it with Leslie. Hi, Leslie.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So before we talk about the Elms, we like to start with the question, what have you been reading?
I have been reading a great book by Martha Sandweiss called Passing Strange, and it actually relates to one of her houses, to Kingscote.
Oh.
And it's about a gentleman who essentially lived a double life during the Gilded Age. He was a very well-known intellectual. He was also a surveyor for the federal government's surveying of the Western territories, which became states. He was white, but he had a separate family living in Brooklyn, and his wife was African American, and he had a whole entire family where he passed himself as African American too.
Oh, wow.
So I'm getting through about halfway of the book. It is absolutely fascinating. Newport is discussed at length. His family's history is discussed at length. Kingscote is mentioned. But it is just this incredible perspective on what life was like in the Gilded Age, but the complexities of the social environments, of cultural environments, particularly post-Civil War. It brings a whole host of different perspectives into play, and I just think it's absolutely fascinating and very well written.
This sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
I just started this morning listening to, because I always use audiobooks.
Of course.
The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, because I don't know if you've heard about the new book that's out.
No.
It's called James. It's by Percival Everett, who wrote, did you see the Oscar winner American Fiction?
I did not yet.
It's based on a book, and the author basically, it's sort of a memoir, but sort of not. But he wrote this other book called James, which is the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn from Jim's point of view.
Oh, I love that.
And so I'm really excited to read it, especially because, like, as a librarian, Huckleberry Finn is one of those books that's often, like, seemed controversial.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't understand that it's satire and kind of the point of it. And so I think that's where this book, James, is going to be leading.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to reread Huckleberry Finn because I haven't read it since high school. So. And
you're also never able to leave the Gilded Age, are you? You're reading something that's related to Mark Twain yet again.
Yeah, I'm really
it sucks you in.
Yeah, definitely. So speaking of the Gilded Age, normally I would ask you to tell me a little about the history of the Elms, but since I used to give tours there, I thought it might be fun if you asked me these questions about its history, and you can tell me if my answers are correct and fill in anything I might have forgotten.
All right, Lauren, are you ready?
Okay, yes. Okay. So these are the questions.
Okay. So Lauren, when was the Elms built?
Okay. Now, I could have looked this up ahead of time, and I chose not to.
Okay, honesty.
I don't recall the year. I want to say 1902.
You're so close.
Am I?
Yes.
Was it 1901?
1901. Yeah.
See, but Rosecliff was also 1901, wasn't it?
Rosecliff was 1902.
Oh, I have them switched up.
One of the best parts of the Elms when you go into the library there actually is well on point here. I think they were so excited to have the house completed that they actually carved 1900 into the limestone surround of the marble of the fireplace.
I did not know that.
So I think that they were expecting the house to be finished in 1900, but it was definitely 1901.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. I did not know that.
So next time you're in the library at Elms, take a look.
I will.
All right. So who built it? Who was the architect, let's say?
I know that the architect was Horace Trumbauer.
Ding, ding, ding.
A very unique name.
Yes. If you could give it a style, where would you put it within the architectural style reference?
I know that it was based on a chateau in France.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Could it be Beaux-Arts style?
It certainly is Beaux-Arts in the interior with Allard's interior design. On the exterior, it really is trying so hard to be a complete replication of an 18th century chateau, the Chateau Danier.
Okay.
And yeah, it's interesting. We've looked at that house. It still exists. It's just outside of Paris. And Trumbauer, not being a formally trained architect, really was just copying what he saw.
Wow.
And then when he worked with his designers in the interiors, such as Allard at the Elms, I think there was this great sort of collaboration of the minds of making these incredibly extravagant spaces with all of this ornament that you wouldn't have seen necessarily in the 18th century. So that's what makes it actually a quintessentially 19th century home.
That's interesting. Was it Trumbauer's idea to use that chateau, or was it Berwin's idea?
It's one of the unknown questions, not having full understanding of all the correspondence between the two of them. But I think one of the ideas of how well-known and prolific Trumbauer becomes, particularly with his Philadelphia crowd, and then of course later doing projects elsewhere such as New York and Newport and down at Duke University, is that Trumbauer can do whatever you ask him to do. So it's possible that he was trying to create something from his own studies, from what Berwin had seen in his travels. It's also possible that in coordination with Allard, since Allard lived in Paris,
mm-hmm.
that it could have been something that seemed to just fit perfectly considering the size of the lot. So I speculate, we all speculate, but the concrete truth is somewhere out there in history.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay. And then, of course, who lived there?
Edward Julius Berwin and his sister, Julia Berwin.
Okay, perfect. And for a time, his wife.
And all their staff. Yes. And his wife, yes. Yeah. I forget about Hermione. But
yeah,
yes.
She had a short time there, unfortunately. But yeah, we're learning more and more about the family, about the family who visited as well. One of the most interesting things I've learned about the context of these houses in the Gilded Age, in Newport particularly, they're massive, but they're not built with a large amount of guest rooms. Ward McAllister, paraphrasing sort of what he anecdotes, is that if you're in Newport, you have your own house, you rent your own house, or you're staying in a hotel. To be someone's guest in their house was really something that didn't happen too often, unless it was, I think, completely out of character. So you look at the Elms, and there's not a lot of space for guests to stay. But one of the sort of creative ways in which Berwin allowed for his extended family to come visit is he built 3 additional houses on the road right next to it.
That's right.
He sort of worked his way around that. He just built houses for people rather than having them stay with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Good job. I'd give you an A on the quiz. Well done.
Thank you. So I could probably also answer the next one, which is, what are the top 3 questions that visitors ask on tours? I just went to another house museum, and it was funny because I took a tour and it was just a couple on the
mm-hmm.
tour with me. The woman was a librarian, which is hilarious. And the husband specialized in floors. In every room, he had questions about the floors. And I always found that there was always like one guy who wanted to know like about the pipes or something. Like one thing that I've never seen the pipes. They're in the walls. So there would always be someone who had a question about like one of the things that it was not in the script. I did not know anything about it. People like to knock on the marble to make sure that it's real.
It's real marble, right?
Yeah. But sometimes it isn't. So I think the times when it's not, that gives them license.
Exactly.
They're like,
they feel justified in their knocking, and we're in the back though shaking our heads saying, please don't touch.
Yeah.
It's, if there's a top 3 questions, I'm not quite sure where they are in the ranking, but I think what I've found as part of the purpose of curatorial practice, particularly when it comes to historic houses, is that oftentimes our visitors just don't know anything about architectural history or where these houses fall in history. We often get questions about if enslaved people built these houses, even though they were constructed far after the Civil War. Mm-hmm. If electricity was installed, that's a big question that we have. Were bathrooms inside? There is this understanding that either it's the transitionary period of American ingenuity and technology in domestic architecture is sort of unfulfilled in most people's knowledge bank. So I take that responsibility then very seriously in terms of making sure that's being communicated in a clear way to the public through our tours. And then people do always ask about pets. That's a big question that we get, which is one of the reasons why we have a forthcoming exhibition called Wild Imagination, Animals and Art in the Gilded Age.
Oh, that's
They'll be opening in August of this year. So we're going to be addressing a lot of those questions through that exhibition at Rosecliff, but also then trying to add some of that research back into the tours because the Berwyns were avid dog lovers.
I did not know that.
Yes. Mrs. Berwyn's dog collars are actually written about in a report of what her will contained at her death. And of course, journalism being very sensationalized in the Gilded Age, they were valued at some extraordinary amount of money because they didn't have children, probably where they put their money instead, but they also had monkeys. And
really? Those
reports come from staff who were apparently so frustrated with how awful they were to work with.
Oh my God.
I don't think the monkeys were a long-term pet situation, but the Berwyns they were trying everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of maybe I heard a story that they had monkeys at a party or something, but yes. I don't think I knew that they kept them as pets.
Yeah, so our recent research has a few instances where they're mentioned, in particular staff members accounting for the monkeys being nuisance in the household. So I just would be interested to know, how does a staff person versus a guest to the Elms feel about the monkeys? Because how would the monkeys know who's staff versus guest?
Yeah.
So all of those things that we're eager to suss out as part of our research, which you'd never think, with an art history degree, spending your time looking into.
Monkeys,
yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So has the Elms ever been renovated or added to, or is this the way it looked when it was originally built?
As far as we know, it is one of the most intact houses that we have in our collection. Of course, there's a likelihood that at some point there was electricity that was rewired, perhaps that there were plumbing leaks or roof leaks and things like that, but the house has never been added to. The kitchen even, going into the 1960s when Julia Berwyn still lived there, was still operating the same way that it was in 1901. So there have been slight alterations to some of the servant spaces because of live-in caretakers, and then also because of the need for security stations and office spaces and bathrooms to accommodate all of our guests. But what you see as a visitor on our tour is, for the most part, the house exactly as the Berwyns had designed it.
That's really great that I know where those spaces are, and it's not very noticeable to a visitor.
Which I think was the intention. So whoever did that, if you're out there listening, well done.
Yes. So what would a day in the life look like for the people who lived there?
It's interesting because these houses were really designed for, at least from the owner's perspective, to be occupied about 6 weeks a year. When you come to Newport, it wasn't like you were all of a sudden flinging your dress clothes off and putting your flip-flops on and going to the beach every day. It was a really structured type of society and culture. So in terms of getting up in the morning, you were awoken by one of your staff members. You were dressed in a certain outfit for the first activity of the day, which probably would have been breakfast. And then they're going to the casino and watching lawn tennis, going to the beach club, going for drives up and down Bellevue Avenue, attending tea parties, debutante parties. This extended from basically the moment you woke up until the moment you went to sleep. So it was a very structured type of living and lifestyle, which also involved several outfit changes. So even though we don't necessarily have closets rampant in the Elms, there were lots of spaces for the very elegant gowns and other wardrobe essentials to be stored and then used frequently.
I can imagine the outfits being very warm. So probably there was also that want to like change what you're wearing because you've been sweating in it for like an hour.
Yeah, that's probably part of it too. I mean, Newport was supposed to be looked at as kind of an escape from the ever increasingly hot urban environments that these people were living in mostly full time. So with the beach breeze and an environment that was likely cooler than New York City, I think that combined with still being a bit hot was part of the prerogative there.
Yeah, that's fair. They didn't have AC like we have today to compare to, so They were like, this is nice.
And it, data-wise, it is true from global warming and climate change. It was much cooler then in the summers than it is now.
Do we know like how hot it would get generally?
From meteorological evidence that's in newspapers, what they're reporting at least is that Newport was somewhere in the 70s, maybe the 80s would be kind of the top temperature reached during the summer months, which is why they were here in June or July through August. So that's at least from the evidence that's available through reporting.
Yeah, I mean, that is less than it is here sometimes. So,
and why too these houses have fireplaces. I mean, you would probably have to use them at some point during the evening because it would dip down into much cooler temperatures. But also just from a design perspective, these houses, of course, it exists during the winter too. So you'd have to turn on get those fireplaces going so that your pipes didn't freeze.
Mm-hmm. And they look really nice.
And they're beautiful. Yeah.
What do you think is the most interesting fact about the Elms? I can share what mine is if you want.
Yes.
So my husband also used to work at the Elms in caretaking.
Oh, wow.
And because of that, he showed me that in, I think, the Rose bedroom, there is a shower.
Yes.
Like an original to the house shower. Or very early.
Probably added a little bit later, but yes, very early shower.
It's very cool looking.
Yes.
And it's not on the tour or anything, so anyone listening can't see it. But he showed it to me because he found it one day when he was like going in there for something. And it's so cool.
Yeah.
I've never seen a shower that old before, so.
Yeah, I think it is probably added in within the first 20 years of the house, as far as we know. I should have mentioned that earlier, actually, in terms of the house being altered. But it's not on the tour currently. It's where we have all of our Christmas storage in that bathroom. But we are making plans to move those items out so that we can open up more spaces on the tour. But from my perspective, I think the most interesting part of the house is actually the way in which the Preservation Society has been able to reclaim and reacquire a lot of the original furnishings. Mm-hmm. So the house was being sold to a developer, and all the contents were then sold at auction by Park Renee. It's one of the best auction catalogs I've ever come across because it's all organized by room because the auction took place on site.
Oh, that's really cool.
So all the listed items that were in Mr. Berwin's bedroom, all the listed items in the kitchen are all listed in the kitchen. So when we come across them as part of our contemporary efforts, we know where those things existed.
That's so helpful.
So helpful, yes. And we have had people from all over the country contact us. And of course, our own efforts through keeping in touch with auction houses and dealers have been able to reacquire original pieces, which is just really remarkable. We had a gentleman from Aspen, Colorado, cold call my office about 3 years ago, claiming he had Mr. Berwin's original bed. I said, "Oh, okay, sure," like eye roll. So we did some due diligence. He sent some great photos, told us a really remarkable story that added up quite nicely, and it turns out that it was the original bed.
Oh, wow.
And the original dressing commode, and he gifted them back to us.
Oh, wow.
So when you go to the Elms right now, they've been returned to his bedroom.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So the bed that was there before was not
even close. Not even close.
I'll have to go back and check it out. When was that added?
So we just returned those pieces this spring in 2024. The room has been completely dismantled. We've taken all the wall coverings off because we're investigating how the room was originally put together. Mm-hmm. The wall coverings that had been there since the 80s were reproductions, and we're trying to put together the pieces with the original textile manufacturer, Prel-AC, based in France, to recreate that original textile now that we have the original bed back, and to essentially bring Mr. Berwin's bedroom back to life and really restore it to what it was intended to be. We're still missing original furniture, though. Mm-hmm. So if anybody visits the Elms and they see the bed and the dressing commode and think, I think I know some chairs that may look like that, please call me, because we're still on the hunt for a side table and several chairs that would have been in that space.
That's very cool. The last time I was there was probably about a year ago, so I'll have to go back and see his actual bed.
Yes,
that's
definitely.
really cool.
Yeah.
And also, when you mentioned the conservation, the other thing I find very interesting about the Elms is the paintings in the dining room. I was working there when you guys acquired back the final painting.
Yes.
So for our listeners, there are these paintings that were created for the dining room at the Elms.
Actually, they were
dining room was built
around the paintings.
Yes, okay.
Because they're 17th century Venetian paintings.
That's right. And the whole theme of the dining room is Venice. It has like St. Mark's Lion and everything. And there was one missing. And like when I started giving tours, we were like, this one is missing. And then by the time I left, we were like, look, it's back. Yeah. So that was definitely really cool to see that happens.
Yeah. The work in these houses, it might seem when you come to visit like, oh, they're furnished, they must be finished. The work is never done, ever, ever, ever. Because we're not just looking at houses in the way one person lived in them for their lifetime. We're looking at these houses in the way that they've been used throughout their lifetimes and their existence. So unfortunately, nobody wrote down everything they did every single day. And when they moved this table to that part of the room or, sold something. So, we're still trying to put together those pieces of history. Yeah.
So what is your favorite room in the house?
Well, it's Mr. Berwin's bedroom now,
okay.
with all the work we've done on it. It is one of the smallest rooms in the house. It is also not directly accessible from any of the main pathways. It's incredibly private, and it's attached to his wife's bedroom. So it's between the family room and his wife's bedroom. Of course, he has his own bathroom and his own closet, but it sort of speaks to a man who has made his way. He wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He worked his way up. He certainly, made his fortune at the expense of a lot of other people, but it's not, his room is not an ostentatious show of wealth. It's a very private space for, private reflection and meditation and sleep, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I never really thought about the fact that there isn't a door from his room onto the hallway.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is a door that's in the hallway that goes into a corridor that connects.
Little passageway?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So technically it's indirect, but still you couldn't just open a door in the main hallway and go right into his room.
Right.
So he'd hear you coming.
Yeah. Which is also very nondescript.
Yes.
So the house that I just took a tour at was the Lippert House Museum. Mm-hmm. And the man of the house has his big bedroom door. There's an alcove to go in, and there's initials over it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there might be initials at the breakers too, monograms in the bedrooms and
in the bedrooms. Yeah.
Very this is my room.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. Edward's room is it is a small little room. I mean,
yeah.
We always used to say on the tour too that he wasn't there as often as his wife was, mm-hmm. because often the men would come later after work on Friday and then
right.
leave to go back to work on Monday. And the women were there kind of all of the time in the summer.
Well, and the privacy thing is, by comparison to, say, Alva and William Vanderbilt, who are down the street at Marble House, their bedrooms face Bellevue Avenue. So they're looking out on the avenue, mm-hmm. and Edward and Hermione are looking out in their backyard. So I think it goes to show that they may have had a lot of outward wealth, but they may have been very internal kind of people.
That's true. Yeah.
Speculation, but it's at least what the room arrangement says to me.
Mm-hmm. But speaking of facing Bellevue Ave,
mm-hmm.
this isn't a room, but I think one of my favorite things about the Elms, and I don't even know if this story is true, so you can correct me.
Let's hear it.
But somewhere, I don't think it was in the script, maybe it was, somewhere along the line, I heard that facing Bellevue Ave at the Elms on the wall are these urns, and Edward's face is on the urns.
They are.
Because Alva Vanderbilt said something along the lines of him being ugly, and he said, well, you'll have to look at my face every time you go up and down the street to get to and from your house.
I don't know that story.
That's what I heard, but I don't think it's in like the actual tour script. Like I think a tour guide told me that.
Okay.
So
I don't know that story exactly. Yes, Edward's face is on several of the planters that line the wall on Bellevue Avenue. Alva and Hermione were allies in terms of society in Newport, so maybe it was tongue in cheek.
Maybe,
but maybe he had a great sense of humor. Who knows? But I'll have to look into that. No, I'm not familiar with that story, but it is funny to see a mustached man sort of staring down at you as you walk down Bellevue.
It is. So his bedroom doesn't face Bellevue, but he does.
But his face
eternally faces Bellevue.
Oh man, good for him.
So why preserve the Elms?
Well, the Elms, we saved it actually from being completely destroyed. When Julia Berwin passed away and the family that survived wasn't interested in keeping up the house because it would cost a fortune. She sold the house, or at least her estate sold the house to a developer, and it was going to be torn down and made into perhaps a shopping center or perhaps condominiums. And Catherine Warren, who's the founder of the Preservation Society, had spent so much of her efforts in trying to save Newport's colonial heritage. And the Elms was really the first, house in the chopping block in terms of a mansion down Bellevue Avenue. And they'd already seen another one of the houses down the street being torn down for a parking lot as well as a shopping complex. So she made certain that it was rescued. As a home, it is a particularly interesting style of architecture. Again, Horst Trumbauer as sort of this unsung American hero of architecture. And I think what we're also finding through studying Berwin is that his complexity as a person is really demonstrative of, this first generation accumulation of wealth during the Gilded Age. He serves his country in the Navy. He is very resourceful and tactful in the way that he strategizes, where he puts himself in society and in business. But he also demonstrates the oncoming need for workers' rights. And in the work that he does in the coal mines, him and his brother Charles built this Berwin White Coal Company in western Pennsylvania and Kentucky and West Virginia. And in the way that at least it's reported that coal miners are being treated, it smells like, looks like, and feels like the basis for a lot of the policy and governing that starts to take place in the early 20th century for workers' rights and for labor unions. So that is a really amazing story to be able to tell in a house like that. This huge, these polarizing types of lived experiences that are happening at that time, we can sort of share that in a glimpse. So you really understand what life was like during that period, not just what it looks like, but what it actually was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I remember too, did he have like a coal mining town or towns?
Yes, that Windbur, Pennsylvania, which is basically Berwind, but Windbur. Yes, so they had created this town. They had sited all of these mines. They were recruiting coal miners from across the world. They had advertisements in papers in native languages telling people of all the great opportunity that there was. And they had hundreds, if not thousands, of staff members and a real monopoly on American coal mining and distribution. They had the official contract with the U.S. Navy for powering all the steamships, which that's the majority of the way those naval vessels were powered. And then Berwind also then ventured into, cargo transport with shipping, as well as, the owning of different ports in which those ships would then be delivered to. So he was a schemer. He was a brilliant businessman. In a lot of ways, he's kind of the Jeff Bezos of the Gilded Age, because he's not just looking at providing a supply. He's looking about how you actually provide it, the transportation methods. Amazon has their own fleet of delivery trucks now. They have their own warehouses. It's comparing apples to apples, really, just different centuries.
Wow. So let's talk about the filming of the Gilded Age at the Elms. What was that like, opening up a historic house to a big film crew?
It was very overwhelming. We were really happy to partner with HBO, particularly in that a lot of the filming started to take place during the pandemic. We had been closed. We were depleted of resources, and bringing in HBO was really an economic life raft for us. So in terms of preparing the spaces, I will say that they were very respectful and had the utmost level of professionalism in terms of the teams that we interfaced with. So they do site visits, they talk through what their plans are with us. We would then give them, an estimate of time as well as work that needed to be done in order to create the backdrop that they wanted. For example, at the Elms, the hood over the kitchen stove had to be repainted because it was the paint was flaking. It didn't look very nice, and they wanted it to look great on camera. So, we took on those projects. They helped fund those projects. So they were funding preservation throughout the entire course of our partnership. Right. But emptying out the rooms that you see on the show was really a time-intensive task. And we have an incredibly patient and dedicated staff that did it in the best way possible. But it's a lot of work. But it's, at the end, very cool to see the rooms that you spend almost every day in featured on, a really successful television show.
Yeah, it was, it's so interesting because, of course, I worked at the mansions. My husband worked at the Elms in maintenance, but he also works in the film industry and actually worked on the Gilded Age season 2.
Oh, wow.
So we were invited to the premiere of the final episode at Jane Pickens Theater.
Oh, great.
And it was so crazy for him to be seeing people from set, but also we saw people that we used to work with years ago at the Preservation Society. It was very weird and also very cool to see the houses on screen and to be the Elms, and then the caretaker is sitting right behind us, and we missed him. We hadn't seen him in so long, so it was very cool to have all of that just combined.
And big shout out to Harold Matthews, who's the longtime caretaker of the Elms. I've never seen anyone more dedicated to a job, and also just with the utmost integrity. Harold does an incredible job at the Elms.
Yeah, it was very cool to see him again after a long time.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that was nice. And also Ray, who is a tour guide there. We saw him there, so that was great too.
Ray is the best.
So, have you watched The Gilded Age? And if so, do you have a favorite character?
I have watched it, both for pleasure, but also because I had to for work. Favorite character... It's hard to say, but I always lean more towards the servants and the staff. I really loved the character from season 1 and into season 2, the Russell's chef, who, of course, fakes French. And then, we meet him in season 2 in the beginning of a very sweet, romance with one of the ladies' maids. So I particularly enjoy that because you see what it was like for that level of American citizen to experience life during that period. And I identify that with that more because that's more likely to be my ancestor than the Russells. So I like to see them, be happy and prosper.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
I think I do love to watch Mrs. Russell just be Alva, but then also I like her, but from working at Marble House and hearing stories about Alva, and she was a suffragette, but she also kind of forced her daughter into an arranged marriage, which is definitely happening in the Gilded Age. And so it's very I have complicated feelings. I'm I love how strong-willed she is, and she's I'm gonna conquer society, and she does it, and I'm sort of rooting for her, but I'm also wait, no,
we know what happens next.
Yeah. So I think I just enjoy loving to hate her, maybe.
I know. Yeah, that's the sign of a good show, though.
Yeah,
that sort of character drama is unavoidable, and we'll see what season 3 brings.
Yeah. Well, that is my next question is what are you hoping to see in season 3 besides more of the Elms and Newport, of course?
I'm actually wondering if Julian Fellows will write into it where we learn from Alva's mistake. If Mrs. Russell does end up marrying her daughter off, or she comes to her senses and realizes that, money and privilege aren't everything.
Yeah.
So I'm still waiting to hear what the Russells' backstory is. We know Alva's backstory. They're obviously, quote unquote, new money, but where do they come from?
Yeah.
And Larry and Gladys being these idyllic figures to basically woo over the society that they're in and helping their parents along the way. We certainly see that with characters that were real in life, but I just love to know where Mr. and Mrs. Russell really come from.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to have a little throwback.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, like, especially in like the third season and beyond of shows, that's when they start getting into backstories. They're like, okay, people are definitely invested enough to know about their backstories. So yeah, I'm hoping to see some of that too.
Yeah.
I think that'll be good.
I'd also love to see, having been a huge Downton Abbey fan, Shirley MacLaine plays the mother of, I'm now forgetting her name. Oh my gosh. I'm such a big fan, but anyways, you know who Shirley MacLaine plays. But she talks about, in an episode of Downton Abbey, having a cottage in Newport.
Yes.
Would love to see
a crossover.
Early Shirley MacLaine as a crossover.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember watching Downton Abbey and that just like one line, I was like, Newport! Yeah. So yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Because she says the Duke of Marlborough goes there, which is who Alva's daughter marries, Consuela. And I think she's maybe like inviting another character in that scene in Downton Abbey to come to her cottage. And she said it's on Bellevue Avenue. So that could be good.
Interesting.
We shall see.
Julian, are you listening?
So when can people tour the house? What is the season and what are the hours?
So the house just reopened in April. After being closed for 10 weeks, we had major restoration and preservation work happening there. But it's open daily right now. For adults, it's a $25 ticket for the guided experience that is provided now through an app on your phone or through paper scripts that we hand out at the front door. There are lower ticket prices for seniors as well as for children. There's also the Elms Servant Life Tour, which is $20 per person. And that is a guide-led experience through the servants' quarters that are on the third floor, through all the working spaces of the house, and even down into the mysterious coal tunnel. So it's a great, well-rounded experience. I'm looking forward to, in September of this year, we're going to be launching a landscape tour.
Oh, okay.
So also app-driven, but you'll be able to go throughout the entire landscape and learn about how the Berwins expanded the plot of land that they had after they finished the house, adding on the stables and carriage house and the sunken garden. Some of our research into one of Trumbauer's colleagues, Julian Abel, who was the first certified African-American architect in America, how we believe he actually contributed to the Elms. So lots of really exciting information to come. And, you know, it's certainly part of what we understand and also value is that it's not just the house, it's the entire property that holds all of this potential for people to enjoy and learn from. So it's great to get people outside.
Yeah. And the like 3 weeping beaches that are grown very close together is just very cool to go under the branches and everything. Yeah. It's very nice. And nice little shady spot on a sunny day too. And
we're working very hard to save them because there is a beech tree disease that's going around. And it is affecting a lot of Aquidneck Island. So those examples in particular we're fighting to save. So
good.
Yeah.
And do you offer membership?
We do offer membership at various levels. So we offer a series of memberships. We have a new membership level. That's the Pineapple membership. That's $140 a year. We have the individual membership at $115, the dual at $160, the family at $199. We also have premium memberships such as patron and benefactor, and also a new young patron. All that information is available on our website. You can become a member on our website or at any of the properties that you go to. And if you've already bought a ticket and decide, this is so great, I want to support the Preservation Society, that same day you can go and use the price of that ticket to convert yourself into a member. So we make it easy for you on all levels. And membership really is an essential part of what we do as an institution. It's the money that we can count on to do big projects because of the investment people are making in us, not just through a single ticket, but knowing that they're going to come back over and over again. And we want to cultivate those relationships and show that there's so much to do at our houses, not just take a tour. These are, your backyards. They are places that offer, an escape. And so along with, just the importance of place, we hope to give a lot of benefits to our members and provide a lot of different opportunities for them to enjoy and interact with our sites.
And they're always changing.
Always changing.
As we talked about Mr. Berwin's bedroom. Now I have to go back so I can see it.
Absolutely.
So if anyone is interested in getting involved at the Preservation Society, do you take volunteers?
We do. So Deb Hunt is our volunteer coordinator. She is maybe the world's nicest person. And Deb will take inquiries and will try and match levels of interest to the different opportunities that we have. Every single one of our departments relies on volunteers. We need thousands of volunteer hours a year in order to, weed and garden, to help with our mass mailings, to do research. So there's a volunteer opportunity for everyone who's interested.
That's great. And is there anything else you'd like listeners to know about the Elms that we haven't mentioned yet?
Stay tuned. The Elms will evolve. We're looking at the Elms as a great way to invest in new technologies that help bring in younger, more diverse audiences to share the stories we already know and the stories that we're working on. So the Elms will really be a laboratory for us to showcase what a historic house museum can do. We hope to be leaders in that field. We hope that it meets people where they are and really shows the importance of investing in these properties, saving them, continuing to look into their research and showcase what we know of the past and how that can inform our future.
And we wrap up the show with a segment called The Last Chapter, where we talk about a library or bookish related question. Did you have a book recommendation or something related to books to the museum?
I mean, definitely Passing Strange. When it comes to the Berwins, there's not a lot of published material on Edward and Hermione Berwin, but our other houses have plenty of books that are related to them. But I'm really finding this book by Martha Sandweiss to be an incredible new aspect of life during the period. But we have T.J. Stiles wrote a great book about the Vanderbilt family. I also am just liking the opportunity to learn more about all the context of the period. Looking at the biographies of President McKinley being assassinated and then Theodore Roosevelt taking over office. There's just so much happening in this period that really is the groundwork for the society that we have today. So if you can find something that is nonfiction that delves into the development of America during the Gilded Age, I don't think you will be left disappointed. I think you'll start to really see these roots that we've established and are living with today, but in some cases also trying to change and to modernize.
It's definitely a fascinating time. And when I was at the Lippitt House Museum, actually on the tour, the guide made a great point, which is that the Victorian era and the Gilded Age was really the start of kind of the leisure culture that is now obviously thriving today. Mm-hmm. So this idea of like, yes, you have work, yes, you have home life, but you also have activities that you like to do, hobbies, interests that are very important and social events. So it's interesting to think of how that has evolved to today and almost gone a little bit backwards, where it started being like, oh, to see my friends, I'm going to join this group and I'm going to take up this hobby. And now it's like, oh, this is the hobby that I do at my house and I never see my friends. Yeah. So, but then it's already starting to go back to like, I have more book groups now, like at work, like people are trying to get back to seeing people again. Yeah. We got so confined that then we realized, hey, I miss people and people are getting more social again, I think.
I mean, and in some ways, it's harkening back to the Spanish flu of the early 20th century. I think that's how you get the Roaring 20s.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah,
we're right there, and we've had plenty of scholars speak to us about how we might be living in the next Gilded Age, and I certainly see the comparisons. Each period is going to be unique, but at the same time, we are learning from our past, and hopefully we are not doomed to repeat the things we should repeat. Yeah, I can see that too. And if Julius Berwind was the Jeff Bezos of his day, then... Oh, let's see. Well, Jeff Bezos doesn't have the mustache of Edward Berwind, but that's okay.
He wishes he did.
He does. He wishes.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
This has been great. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something new about your local history, and I encourage you to visit the Elms to see it in person, learn even more about its fascinating history, and support its maintenance for future generations. For more information about visiting the Elms, visit newportmansions.org. You can also follow the Preservation Society of Newport County on Facebook at Newport Mansions and on Instagram at Newport_mansions. Overdoing It is proud to be a resident partner of the Rhode Island Center for the Book and brought to you by library staff and community members all around the Ocean State. The project has been funded in part by the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services. Our theme music is Joyride Jamboree by Neuroflow. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify to help us reach more Rhode Islanders. Thank you again for listening, and this has been another episode of Overdoing It, the Rhode Island Library Podcast. We're overdoing it, but you're doing just fine.